CIS Payroll generally refers to a payroll company or a contracting intermediary business that specializes in the construction industry scheme and manages the CIS reporting or tax arrangements for both the subcontractor and the contractor. If it works in the construction industry scheme, then yes, it does. A genuinely self-employed individual who works on a self-employed basis does not get paid for holidays. An employee is entitled, obviously, to receive holiday pay, as is a worker who is an intermediary class of employment, halfway between the genuinely self-employed and an employee. An employee gets holiday pay. A worker who is subject to supervision, direction and control in how he operates and is part and parcel of the organisation for whom he's working is also entitled to holiday pay. A genuinely self-employed subcontractor is not. Through the HMRC Government Gateway account, you go into that account, into your own account there, and there is a route which you have to follow. You can also take advice from the CIS helpline, which is 0300 200 3210, he said, reading off a page to his right. Well, one presumes we are concerned about the difference in payment methods. Both are methods of treatment of earnings for tax purposes. So they both are methods of taxation. PAYE applies to all employees. So anyone who is an employee must be taxed through the PAYE system. Occasionally, some workers or self-employed individuals are taxed through PAYE, but that's fairly uncommon. The construction industry scheme, or CIS, is a specific tax regime for the self-employed who work in the construction industry. They can be paid one of three ways. They can be paid gross, having applied for and received gross payment status. They are paid under deduction, which is the normal method for a self-employed subcontractor to be paid, and he is deducted, if he's known to the revenue, 20% of his earnings, which go towards his tax bill, or if the individual is not known to the tax authorities, he is deducted 30%. And both of those figures, 20% or 30%, are set against their tax burden for the year. So that's the difference. The genuinely self-employed are paid through CIS. Employees and occasionally workers are paid through PAYE. You have to pass a series of tests through the CIS portal, through your Government Gateway account. You then log on to the CIS element, and there are a number of tests which you have to pass. CIS gross payment status means that as a subcontractor within the construction industry scheme, you are not subject to any deduction from the payments that you receive for the invoices that you raise or that you are due. So, for instance, we mentioned payment under deduction earlier. A sole trader, an individual subcontractor, if he's due £100, will receive £80 with £20 paid to the government by the contractor. If you have gross payment status, the individual subcontractor receives the whole £100. Generally speaking, the penalties within the CIS relate to the late submission of a CIS 300 return. So a contractor who is registered with the CIS must submit a monthly return to tell HMRC who he has paid within the CIS scheme. If he is late submitting that CIS return by just one day, he is subject to a £100 penalty by HMRC. If the return is still not submitted after 2 months, there's another £200 penalty. If the return is still not submitted by 6 months, then it's a further £300 penalty, or 5% of the liability, whichever is the greatest. And if it remains unsubmitted after 12 months, further penalties apply up to £3,000, or in total, depending on the circumstances of the reason for the late payment. So that's what it refers to in general terms. It's the late submission of a CIS 300.